The day my boss stole a $3 billion project out from under me, I didn't scream, cry, or quit. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Insurance. Back then, I still thought maybe I wouldn't need it. I'm not a dramatic person. I'm a systems engineer in my late 30s who gets excited about clean integration diagrams and on time milestones. I don't yell, I don't slam doors, and until last year, the biggest conflict in my career was about whose name went first on a patent filing. So when our company landed the Atlas program, it felt like the opposite of drama. It felt like gravity. Atlas was a $3 billion multi-year contract to design and integrate a next-generation launch platform for a government client. The kind of program that doesn't just pay your salary, it defines your career. People retire on projects like this. People get their names in trade magazines. My name was never going to be in a magazine. That was fine. I just wanted to build something that worked. I'd been at the company for 9 years when Atlas came in. I'd led a couple of mid-sized programs, delivered enough under budget that procurement knew my coffee order. When my director, Hale, called me into his office, I honestly thought he was about to tell me someone else got the job. He sat behind his desk, jacket off, tie loose, smiling like he owned the sun. "Grant," he said, "you're my Atlas guy." I remember blinking once slowly. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack. You've got the trust of the engineers and the patience for the client. I'll sponsor you at the exec level, but you'll run the day-to-day. Chief systems lead and acting program manager while we get the org chart formalized." I didn't hug him. I didn't know him that well. I just nodded, felt that weird lightheaded rush, and said the only thing my brain could produce, "Okay, I won't let you down." He laughed. "Don't let the schedule down. The rest we can spin." That was 18 months before he pushed me off the project. The first year of Atlas was, honestly, it was the best work of my life. Long days, yes. Missed dinners, yes. But the good kind of tired. The kind where you fall asleep with your laptop open and wake up with a solution to the thing that kept you up the night before. I built the core team, picked the subsystem leads, set up the integration reviews. We fought over interfaces, argued about tolerances, and still hit every major gate. The client was cautious but impressed. Their technical rep started sending me questions directly instead of through Hale, which is how I should have known the first crack was forming. The thing about cracks is you never see the first one. You only notice when the wall is already leaning. The first time I felt something was off was at a quarterly review with the execs. I'd spent 2 weeks building a deck that explained our risk profile in plain language. I'm not a natural storyteller, so it took work. Charts, simplified diagrams, 1 slide per question I knew they'd ask. 10 minutes before the meeting, Hale swung by my office. "Got the deck?" he asked. Casual voice, eyes already on his phone. "Yeah, final version's on the drive," I said. "I'll run the tech. You can handle the business." "Actually," he cut in, "I'll walk them through it this time. They want a unified voice. You know how it is." I hesitated. "Sure, but if they get into the weeds—" "Grant." He finally looked up. There was a weight in his tone I wasn't used to. "You'll be in the room. Just jump in when I cue you. I need them to see I've got this under control." It sounded reasonable enough. He was the director. Atlas ultimately rolled up to his name. I emailed him the deck. In the meeting, he didn't cue me. Not once. He presented my slides like he'd spent the last month living inside them. My team and I identified 3 critical integration risks. When I sat with the client's safety rep, I proposed an alternative stacking sequence. They nodded. They liked what they heard. I sat 3 chairs down, hands folded, and watched my work come out of his mouth like it had never touched my laptop. The only time he said my name was at the end. "And of course, Grant here is keeping us honest on the technical side." A polite chuckle, the kind people give a background extra. In the hallway, he clapped me on the shoulder. "See? Nailed it?" "Yeah," I said. It came out flatter than I meant. He frowned slightly. "You okay?" "Next time, just throw me a question or 2, I said. "They need to know who's actually running the engineering." His smile returned. cooler this time. They know I'm accountable. That's the important part. Don't worry, you'll get your visibility. That was the first time I opened the insurance folder. I dragged the meeting invite into it, then the first version of the deck with my name in the metadata, then the revised version he'd forwarded to his assistant. It felt stupidly paranoid. I told myself I was just being organized. Little things kept stacking up. Status emails to the client where "we decided" turned into "I suggested." Internal summaries where my name moved from lead to support. I'd walk past his glass-walled office and see my diagrams up on his screen, while he rehearsed talking points alone, lips moving silently. Still, he never cut me out of the work itself. I was in every technical review, every design decision, every late-night call when a supplier slipped. On the ground, the team saw me as the one in charge. That kept me calm longer than it should have. Then the launch announcement changed everything. Atlas was always going to end in a spectacle. The client loved pageantry. But when they confirmed the launch date, it turned into something else entirely. A joint press event. Government officials. A live stream. The CEO was flying out. Our project, my team's work, was suddenly the centerpiece of a very public victory lap. Hale's posture shifted overnight. He started saying things like optics and narrative. He attended meetings he used to skip and skipped the follow-up work he used to help with. He pulled my senior leads into one-on-ones without me. At first I told myself he was just strategizing the message. Then I got an email from corporate communications asking me for technical validation of the talking points Hale had provided. I opened the attachment. It was a glossy narrative about how he had personally overseen key design breakthroughs, guided the team through a critical architecture pivot, and championed a high-risk, high-reward integration plan. The only place my name appeared was in a sentence near the bottom. Grant, one of our senior engineers, was instrumental in supporting Hale's vision. I stared at that sentence long enough that the words blurred. I didn't reply right away. I walked down the hall to Hale's office instead. The door was half open. He was on a call, laughing at something, feet crossed on the corner of his desk. He caught my shadow and waved me in, pressing his phone to his chest. 2 minutes, he mouthed. I sat, noticed for the first time the framed mock-up of the Atlas vehicle on his shelf, with his nameplate under it. Not the team's, not mine. He hung up, still smiling. What's up? Comms sent me the launch talking points, I said. There's a problem. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. Problem? They've got you listed as the primary architect. Personally oversaw design. Championed the architecture. I forced my voice to stay level. That's not accurate. I'm the systems lead. The architecture is my work and the team's. He leaned back, laced his fingers over his stomach. Grant, it's all true in a sense. I am responsible for the program. You lead under me. That's not what it reads like, I said. It reads like I'm your assistant. He sighed, the patient with a child sigh. Look, the client doesn't care whose hands typed what. They care that the person with the title stands behind it. That's me. This is how these things are framed. Then adjust the framing, I said. I'm not asking for a parade, just an accurate description of the work. His jaw flexed. I saw the first crack in his pleasant mask. Grant, we're 3 weeks out from a launch with the secretary of whatever on stage, and you're worried about a line in a press release? I'm worried about a pattern, I said quietly. My work, your name, over and over. The room felt smaller suddenly. He dropped his hands to the desk. Let me make this simple, he said. I need to be the face of Atlas. That's the expectation at my level. You're invaluable, and everyone who matters internally knows it. You'll get your bonus, your rating, your next promotion. But externally, they want one name. It's mine. I held his gaze. And if I'm not okay with that? He smiled again, but there was no warmth in it now. Then maybe you're not the right fit for the front line anymore. I didn't answer immediately. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Is that a threat? It's reality, he said. You're starting to sound emotional. That worries people at this level. That line, more than anything, did something to me. Emotional, as if caring who gets credit for $3 billion of work was a mood swing. I went back to my office, shut the door, and added the talking points to the insurance folder. 2 days later, the shoe dropped. We were in the main conference room for what was supposed to be a routine readiness review. The client's technical rep was on the screen, a few execs dialed in. My team lined one side of the table, Hale the other. Halfway through, after I'd just finished walking through a risk mitigation plan, Hale cleared his throat. "Before we wrap," he said, "I want to talk about some internal adjustments." He looked directly at the client rep and then at our VP. "Given how close we are to launch, I've decided to consolidate communication. Effective immediately, I'll be taking direct ownership of the technical interface. Grant will transition into a supporting role back at HQ to make sure the rest of our portfolio doesn't suffer." The room actually went quiet. My lead for propulsion turned his head toward me so fast I heard his neck crack. I kept my eyes on Hale. "This is the first I'm hearing of that," I said. He didn't look at me. "We can discuss the details offline," he said smoothly. "But for the purposes of this launch, I'll be your point of contact." He smiled at the client. "Streamlined accountability." The client rep hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "If that's how your organization wants to structure it," he said, "Grant's been very helpful." "Grant will still be involved," Hale said, "just not on the front line." There it was, the push. No explanation, no performance issue, no sudden change in scope. Just a neat little shove sideways, right as the cameras were about to roll. I nodded once, slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene in front of the client. But on the inside, something very small and very important shifted. For the first time in 9 years, I stopped thinking of myself as part of we and started thinking in terms of I. By the time the meeting ended, Atlas was no longer my project. But I knew something he didn't. I still had every email, every draft, every signature, every decision trail, leading right back to who had actually built the thing he was about to parade in front of the world. The strange thing about being pushed off a project you built is that for a while, nothing looks different. My badge still opened the same doors. My calendar was still full of Atlas meetings. My inbox still overflowed with action items. But the tone changed. That was the first thing I noticed. Tone is always the first thing. Engineers who used to stop by my doorway to ask for advice suddenly emailed instead, with Hale copied. Leads who once argued passionately now sent me sanitized updates, the kind that say nothing and protect everyone. People didn't avoid me. They just stopped including me. That's worse. 2 days after Hale made his streamlined accountability announcement, I walked into the integration lab and saw the whiteboard. My architecture diagram, the real one, the one I'd built iteration by iteration over a year, had been redrawn. Not wrong, just changed in a way that erased the fingerprints of its origin. New labels, new color coding, a new header at the top. Atlas Architecture, Hale Revision. I stood there longer than I should have. It wasn't about the drawing, it was the intention. He wanted a version of the project that had no trace of me. I asked the systems team who made the changes. They shifted in their chairs. Someone said quietly, "He asked us to clean it up for the launch deck. He wanted it to look like something he could speak to more naturally." Right. Naturally. I didn't yell. I took a picture of the whiteboard, sent it to my personal email, and walked back to my office. My new assignment was vague. Support cross-portfolio alignment. It meant nothing. It was the kind of phrase companies use when they want you out of the way without having to say it out loud. The next blow came during SRR prep, the systems readiness review. I wasn't supposed to lead anymore, but the client still trusted me. So they asked a question I'd expected. Details about the redundancy routing in the power subsystem. I opened my mouth. Hale cut in before I spoke. "We've already resolved that," he said confidently. I walked the team through a redesign last month. Redesign? He'd barely attended those meetings. I'd been the one who argued with the supplier, who fixed the routing conflict at 2 in the morning, who wrote the revised spec they were using. I watched the client nod, satisfied, and it hit me. The story was changing because he needed it to. And if he was willing to lie in front of the client, there was no ceiling on what he'd do behind closed doors. But that was just the beginning. A week later, corporate communications sent out the draft agenda for the launch. I scanned for my name. Not out of ego, out of self-defense. It wasn't there. Not in the technical panel, not in the Q&A, not even in the backup bench of advisors. The only people from our division listed were Hale and 2 executives who had touched Atlas about as much as a tourist touches a museum display. I leaned back in my chair, hands on my face, and for the first time I felt anger. Not at the company, not at the system, at him. One man who decided the project was his legacy, and I was a threat to the story he wanted to tell. I forwarded the agenda to the folder. The folder was getting heavy. It had meeting notes, original drafts, metadata on design documents, timestamps, screenshots, version histories. Things engineers never think of as proof until they need them to be. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off and reopened the folder. I scrolled slowly, one by one. Every file told the same truth. I had built the architecture. I had led the team. I had managed the risk mitigation. I had owned the design. No talking point in the world could erase time-stamped reality. And yet, in the morning, Hale called me into his office with the bright, fake cheerfulness of someone who thinks he's doing you a favor. "Grant, the next few weeks will be intense," he began. "I want you to stay back. Keep an eye on the home front. The team needs leadership here too." "Leadership?" I echoed. "You've reassigned every one of my direct reports." He waved a hand. "For optics. You know how launch cycles are." "Optics," I repeated. "Right." He leaned forward. "Don't make this difficult. You'll get full credit internally. But external recognition has to be consistent. One face, one message, one leader." "And that's you," I said. He smiled softly. "I knew you'd understand." I walked out of his office calm. Too calm. That's how I knew something had broken. Not loudly. Quietly, like ice cracking under your feet. At lunch, I called someone I hadn't talked to in years. A lawyer I knew from a previous acquisition. Not a dramatic type. A quiet one. The kind who reads every footnote twice and never raises his voice. We met in a cafe far from the office. He ordered tea. I ordered nothing. I opened my laptop and slid it toward him. "I need to know," I said, "if someone is trying to remove my authorship from a project of this scale. What are my options?" He didn't interrupt. He scrolled. He checked dates. He checked signatures. He checked version histories with the seriousness of a surgeon looking at scans. 20 minutes in, he closed the laptop. "This is not a dispute about credit," he said. "This is a documented pattern of professional misappropriation. If the launch proceeds using your architecture and you are officially removed from the program, you have grounds for formal grievance, internal investigation, and, depending on what they publish, potentially a claim of intellectual contribution misrepresentation." I exhaled. In English. "You have leverage," he said simply. "More than they think." That was the first moment I felt something close to relief. Not victory, just the sense that I wasn't crazy, that what was happening was real and wrong. We drafted a formal internal complaint. Nothing dramatic. No accusations, just facts. Dates, attachments, discrepancies between document authorship and public narratives. He advised me to submit it the day the team left for the launch. "Timing matters," he said. "If they're already airborne, they won't be able to bury this quietly." It was a cold strategy. Calculated, not my style. But I agreed. Back at the office, the atmosphere shifted again. This time colder. People looked at me with a blend of sympathy and fear. Engineers hate politics. They could smell it in the air. One of my subsystem leads, Mara, stopped me by the printers. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "Are you really off Atlas?" "I'm still supporting from here," I said, choosing my words carefully. She swallowed. "It feels wrong. The whole team knows who built this thing." "Knowing isn't enough," I said. "Documenting is." She held my gaze. "Hale's been rewriting things. Meetings, summaries, even the internal wiki. He thinks no one notices." I nodded. "People notice." She hesitated. "If they ask us to confirm his version, tell the truth," I said. "That's all anyone should do." Her shoulders dropped in relief. But I didn't realize that moment would cost her. The next morning, Mara was suddenly temporarily reassigned to another program. No explanation, no warning, just an email from HR. I saw the message. She walked into my office 5 minutes later, blinking hard, trying not to cry. "He said it's for workload balancing," she whispered. "I know what it is." I did too. That night, I added her reassignment email to the folder, and I realized something important. Hale wasn't just pushing me out, he was cleaning house, removing anyone who remembered how the project really happened. He thought he was winning. I thought so too, for a moment, until something happened that changed everything. Mara forwarded me a file Hale wasn't supposed to have edited, a file that proved the architecture credit line had been altered after approval, with his username in the metadata. She didn't include a message. She didn't have to. I stared at the file on my screen, the evidence unmistakable, and for the first time in months, I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not anger, not grief. Something sharper. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The week of the launch felt like the eye of a storm. Bright, calm, and unnaturally quiet. People walked faster in the hallways, lower voices, quick glances, the kind of corporate silence that tells you everyone knows something is happening, but no one wants to be the one caught knowing it. The Atlas team was scheduled to fly out on Tuesday morning. Hale held a final alignment meeting the evening before. I wasn't invited. Not surprising, he'd scrubbed my name from most of the distribution lists by then, but I watched the team file into the large conference room one by one, carrying laptops and prototypes I'd personally approved. My stomach tightened when I didn't see Mara among them. She messaged me later. He told them I needed on-site support for another client. He didn't want mixed loyalties. Mixed loyalties. Right. The morning of their departure, I walked into the office earlier than I'd been in months. The building was half dark, humming with the low electrical sound that makes every empty office feel haunted. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and read the complaint one more time. Everything was in order. Dates, attachments, version histories, cross-reference statements, the altered architecture doc with his metadata, Mara's reassignment, the communication plan excluding me, the meeting where he officially removed me. My lawyer had added a summary paragraph. Calm, clinical, deadly. This pattern reflects a deliberate misrepresentation of authorship and technical ownership, affecting company integrity, contractual accuracy, and federal reporting obligations. Federal obligations. That's when I understood why his hands had been shaking slightly during the last status meeting. He'd stepped into something larger than credit. The Atlas contract required truthful attribution inside compliance reports. Misrepresenting authorship of critical design elements wasn't a political move. It was a violation with teeth. I clicked send. The complaint went to HR, legal ethics, 2 compliance officers, and the VP of engineering. Then, and only then, did I breathe. By the time I stood up, the Atlas team was probably boarding the plane. Hale, I imagined in first class, rehearsing lines. He liked to rehearse, hands folded over his stomach, eyes half closed, quietly mouthing the speech about vision and bold leadership. He thought I was sitting at my desk sulking. He thought the storm was behind him. It wasn't. Right before lunch, legal reached out. A short message. "We need to speak today." I walked into a small glass conference room where 3 people already sat: legal, compliance, and an HR lead I'd only seen during layoffs. They had the complaint printed, highlighted. They asked questions, not dramatic ones, precise ones. Is this your document? Yes. Were you the primary author of the architecture? Yes. Can you verify this metadata? Yes. When were you removed from the program? I gave the date, the meeting, the witnesses. They weren't skeptical. They were concerned. When the meeting ended, compliance said quietly, "We need to initiate an internal investigation, immediately." "Does Hale know?" I asked. "Not yet," legal said. "We'll notify him after the launch event." After. That was the plan. Quiet, controlled, avoiding scandal. But investigations have a way of finding cracks in timing. In big companies, people talk, not loudly, but enough. By the next morning, subtle ripples moved through the office. People who had barely looked at me in weeks suddenly watched me a little longer in the hallway. I could see the moment when they guessed something was happening behind the glass rooms upstairs. Meanwhile, the Atlas team landed at the launch site. Pictures started appearing on the internal social feed. The stage, the vehicle, the banners. And there he was. Hale, center frame, hand on the hardware I'd designed, smiling like the world finally saw him. At 2:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mara. "Heads up. Something's off. Communications just pulled down the public deck for last-minute adjustments. People look nervous." Adjustments, nervous. Those were the first tremors. The second tremor came an hour later. Compliance asked me to come upstairs. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. I walked into a different conference room, this one bigger, colder. The VP of engineering was there, another legal rep, a senior HR director. 3 laptops open, 2 stacks of printouts. A tension in the air that didn't belong in a normal meeting. "Grant," the VP said, "we've reviewed the initial findings. We need to confirm several inconsistencies." One by one, they laid out documents Hale had submitted over the past 6 months. Rewritten summaries, altered authorship, redlined versions with my attribution removed, side-by-side comparisons with my originals. It was systematic, not sloppy, intentional. 10 minutes in, the VP pushed the papers back, sat in silence, and rubbed his forehead. "This is serious," he said finally. "Very serious." I didn't feel triumph, not even satisfaction. Just a hollow quiet, like the moment after an explosion when the dust hasn't settled yet. The VP asked me a final question. "Grant, do you want to be present when we confront him?" I didn't answer right away. What I wanted, truly, was to not want anything, to not feel revenge, to not become a version of myself built out of resentment. But I also needed the truth spoken aloud, in front of the person who had spent months rewriting reality. "Yes," I said, "I'll be there." He nodded. "He returns Thursday night. We'll hold the session Friday morning." For the first time since Atlas began, my calendar was empty. Empty in a way that felt clean. I went home early, sat on my couch, looked at the blank space on the wall where I once thought I'd put the project plaque. I realized I didn't want it anymore. Thursday morning, the launch went live. I watched the stream. Not out of spite, out of something like mourning. There he was on stage, under lights, talking about his vision, his guidance, the architectural direction he had championed from day one. He looked confident, untouchable, invincible. I watched until the applause ended. Then I closed the window. That night, the team flew back. Someone snapped a picture in the shuttle. Tired faces, half smiles. Hale in the back tapping on his phone. I stared at the photo a long time. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. Friday morning, the office was unnaturally quiet. People sensed something coming. They always do. I sat alone in conference room 4A, hands folded, breathing slow. The VP entered first, then legal, then HR. Footsteps in the hallway. The door opened. Hale walked in, confident, smiling. He didn't notice the printed documents on the table at first. He didn't see the look on the VP's face. He just saw me, and his smile twitched, confused. Grant? What's going on? I didn't answer, because this time he wasn't owed my words. The VP shut the door, and the room changed temperature entirely. I thought the confrontation would be loud. It wasn't. The VP folded his hands on the table. Legal had a neat stack of paper in front of her, squared to the edge like that mattered. HR watched everyone's faces the way people watch the horizon before a storm. Hale pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, still trying to read the room. Okay, he said. Somebody gonna tell me why I got pulled in here before my first coffee? The VP didn't smile. We've received a formal complaint regarding Atlas. We've done a preliminary review. We need to go through some of it with you. Hale's gaze flicked to me. From him? He asked. I didn't answer. The VP did. From Grant, he said, backed by documents we've confirmed. Legal slid the top set of papers across the table. Let's start with this one. He glanced down. It was the architecture document, the original version with my name clearly in the author field, alongside the systems team. Underneath it, the revised for launch version with his name, in the author line and mine removed. I don't understand, he said lightly. We clean these up all the time. The metadata shows the authorship field was changed 3 months after approval, Legal said, by your login. The original record listed Grant as primary author. He shrugged. It's a team effort. I just standardized it. Titles shift, responsibilities shift. The contract requires accurate attribution of primary technical ownership in formal documents. Compliance cut in. This isn't a newsletter. It's a federal deliverable. For the first time since he'd walked in, some of the color left his face. I'm the director, he said slower now. I am responsible. Responsible, the VP repeated. That's not what the document says. It says architect and technical lead. That's not your role. Hale spread his hands. Look, we all know Grant did great work. Nobody's disputing that. But exec communication needs a single point of contact. We aligned on that months ago. Legal flipped a few pages. We're not talking about press blurbs right now. We're talking about internal records, compliance reports, and a pattern of edits that remove Grant's authorship and insert your own. She slid another document over, the internal launch summary, the one where we decided had become I directed. Can you explain these changes? She asked. He scanned the pages, jaw tightening. Language cleanup. This is nitpicking. You know how engineers write. I made it readable for leadership. That's my job. You also removed his name entirely from the technical section, the VP said. That isn't readability. That's erasure. Hale's eyes flicked to me again. Is this what this is about? He said. You didn't get your name big enough on the banner, so you're running to legal? There it was. The jab. The attempt to make it petty. I almost took the bait. Almost. Instead, I kept my voice even. This is about you filing false representations of who designed a $3 billion system, I said, and then removing anyone who questioned it. He laughed once, sharp. You were reassigned, Grant. That happens. Mara was reassigned. People move around. We needed alignment before launch. Compliance opened another folder. The timing of those reassignments lines up exactly with internal pushback on authorship, he said. That's not alignment. That's retaliation. The word landed like a drop tool. Retaliation. That was the moment I realized I wasn't the one on trial. Hale leaned back in his chair, eyes bouncing between faces, looking for an ally. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said. We delivered. The client is happy. Atlas launched. We should be celebrating, not whatever this is. The client is happy because the system works, the VP said quietly. It works because Grant and that team built it. If they find out we misrepresented that in formal records, they will be less happy, and they will not care about your need to be the face. Silence stretched. You could hear the HVAC. Legal took over. Her tone went from conversational to precise. Hale, based on what we've seen so far, there are grounds to open a formal ethics investigation. It will cover documentation, authorship, potential retaliation, and compliance with federal reporting requirements. Effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. He blinked. Administrative leave? You'll surrender your badge before you leave the building, HR added. Your access to Atlas systems is suspended. We'll coordinate a time for you to collect personal items. He stared at her like she'd spoken another language. You can't be serious, he said. Over some wording? I carried that project. I shielded this company. He stopped, looked right at me. This is you, he said. You couldn't handle being benched, so you're trying to take me down with you. I met his eyes. I thought about all the times I'd defended him to the team. All the slack I'd cut him because that's just how it works at that level. All the late nights I'd written what he later called his plan. I went to legal with facts, I said. The rest is between you and your choices. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a brief second, I saw something like panic flicker under the anger. The VP stood. This session is concluded, he said. Hale, HR will escort you to your office. You'll have 15 minutes. Hale pushed his chair back slowly. For a second, I thought he might say something. An apology, an insult, anything. Instead, he just shook his head. Once, hard, like he was trying to dislodge the moment from reality. At the door, he turned back. You think they'll protect you? He said. They'll use you until the headlines die down. Then they'll forget your name, too. Maybe he believed that. Maybe he needed to. I'm not asking them to protect me, I said. I just wanted the truth on paper. He snorted, turned, and walked out with HR. I didn't know it yet, but that meeting would be the last time I'd ever see him in our building. The investigation took weeks. Investigations always do. During that time, I didn't touch Atlas formally. I answered questions. I provided logs. I forwarded anything they asked for. And then I went back to doing what I actually like, solving problems that don't talk back. Mara was quietly brought back onto Atlas oversight, not as a subordinate to Hale, but as a liaison to compliance. A few of the younger engineers started stopping by my desk again, asking real questions, not just, did you hear? Ray and Jenna dragged me out for drinks one Friday. Ray raised a glass. So, he said, what's it feel like to sick the grown-ups on someone who deserved it? I shook my head. It's not about sicking anyone on anyone. It's making sure the work isn't rewritten. Same thing where it counts, he said. 2 months later, the VP called me into his office. He had a folder on his desk, and that expression people get when they're about to say something official. The investigation is complete, he said. I wanted you to hear the key points from me. I sat down. Hale is no longer with the company, he continued. He was given the option to resign in lieu of termination. We also self-reported certain discrepancies to the client and updated internal records to accurately reflect technical authorship. A part of me had expected him to get a slap on the wrist, a quiet reassignment, a soft landing. Hearing that he was gone, actually gone, felt surreal. What about Atlas? I asked. The system is performing within spec, he said. The client appreciated the transparency. We framed the corrections as internal cleanup, not failure. They've requested that future technical briefings list you as the primary systems architect of record. I exhaled. I didn't ask for that. I know, he said. Maybe that's why I'm comfortable giving it. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were 3 things. A formal letter closing out the complaint, confirming that my authorship had been restored across all relevant documents. A compensation adjustment that made my stomach tighten. And an offer. Engineering Fellow, Systems Integration, he said. Atlas-class programs and beyond. No people management unless you want it. You'll have sign-off authority on architecture decisions. Less politics, more building. I read the title twice. You don't have to decide today, he added. You can also walk away clean if that's what you need. Nobody would blame you. I thought about it on the drive home. Thought about starting over somewhere else, carrying this whole story like a bad tattoo. Thought about staying and letting it define me here instead. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I realized I didn't want it to define me at all. I wanted it to live where it belonged, in the files, in the investigation report, in Hale's exit paperwork, a closed chapter, a line item. I accepted the role. The changes were subtle at first. My days filled with diagrams again, but this time my name on them meant what it was supposed to mean. When I walked into a room, nobody wondered if I was about to be replaced mid-sentence. When we argued over a design, it was about tolerances and risk, not whose ego got fed. A month later, I sat across from the client's technical rep in a small conference room, just the two of us. No lights, no cameras, just coffee and a stack of schematics. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. "We worried we were going to lose you in the shuffle." "I thought about leaving," I admitted. "What changed your mind?" I looked at the stack of papers between us, at the tiny line under the title that now had my name on it, not as a trophy, but as a responsibility. I realized I didn't want to run from my own work, I said. I just wanted to stop carrying someone else's story on top of it. He nodded. "For what it's worth, your complaint probably saved us a much uglier situation down the line. People like clean narratives, until the auditors show up." We went back to talking about load margins and failure modes, the things that actually matter when hardware meets reality. At home, life got quieter, not empty, just proportionate. I planted herbs in a box on the balcony. I fixed the shelf in the hallway that had been crooked for 3 years. I stopped checking my email after 10 unless something was literally on fire. Sometimes, when the building is empty and the lab lights are low, I walk past the Atlas hardware. It sits there like any other system. Metal, wiring, code. No ego, no press releases. Just the thing it was always meant to be. I don't feel triumph. I don't feel revenge. I feel something better. Alignment. Between what happened and what's written down. Between what I did and what I'm credited with. Between who I am and what I'm willing to tolerate. People like to imagine justice as a big cinematic moment. A takedown, a speech, a slow clap. It wasn't like that. It was emails, meetings, signatures. Locks changed quietly. Badges deactivated at 11:59 p.m. A name removed from an org chart. When my boss pushed me off a $3 billion project to steal it, he thought he was ending my career. He wasn't. All he really did was give me a reason to stop being the guy who keeps his head down and hopes the right people notice. He taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. You can't control who stands under the lights, but you can decide who you let rewrite your work. And once you decide, really decide, you don't need revenge. You just need the truth, written where it counts, and a door that closes behind the people who can't live with that.